This never happened in the history of my channel. Today we're talking about the newly launched Bloom palette from Natasha Denona, just in time for spring. In today's video, I'm going to show you swatches, palette comparisons, and 3 look tutorials. And of course, I'm going to share my final first impression thoughts at the end of this video. Before we get started, I would love to welcome new visitors and viewers to my channel. Hello, my name is Eve. I love all things beauty. Here on my channel, I share about beauty and lifestyle. I upload new videos every week. If that sounds interesting to you, I hope you enjoyed this video. And subscribe to my channel if you're not yet a subscriber. And not without further ado, let's dive in. So Natasha Denona has just launched her new Bloom eyeshadow palette just in time for spring. I was expecting something for Valentine's Day, and no, it came right after. This has a beautiful corally, peachy, spring and flower inspired color story. It has a really nice balance of mattes and shimmers, and the nice gradient from deeper mattes to lighter mattes, as well as the shimmers. They go in a gradient from darker to lighter. That was a personal touch that Natasha Denona once again included in the design of this palette. She created design of the flower petals, what it looks like with watercolors, and I think this is a really nice artistic approach to creating something that's one of your own. Out of packaging, it looks like that, very similar to the eyeshadow palette. On the back of the carton, as per usual, you see all the information, the diagram of the shades, etc. Palette is 24 months shelf life and was made in Italy. This palette has a combination of different formulas, starting from matte, cream matte, sparkling foil, 4 shades, and 2 shades in silky matte. The shade Equinox, Crisp, and Fleur are duochromes. So this palette is already available. I will have all the retailer links in the description box for you. I do have a discount code if you shop on Natasha Denona direct website. It's EVE10. It saves you 15% off. I personally purchased my eyeshadow palette from Sephora, and surprisingly, Sephora delivered in 2 days, very, very fast. Usually I wait for my Sephora online orders anywhere from 5 to 10 days. This time they definitely surprised me. So this color story is definitely very much appealing to me. I do enjoy rosy, like peachy, corally shades, and especially going into spring and summer. Generally, at a first glance, it looks considerably like warm and neutral to me, which is kind of like my comfort zone and my go-to looks. So you'll probably see them today. By the way, the makeup look that I have on my eyes, it's not made with this palette. This whole entire makeup I just quickly put together to film the intro for this video, but you will see 3 look tutorials made with this palette specifically. At first glance, this palette definitely looks more monochromatic. There is a slight variation of shades. I do have a suspicion that most of the looks are going to come out very, very similar. Nevertheless, I'm excited to play with this today and show you the look tutorials. But before we get into that, let's get into palette comparisons. I went through my entire collection and I pulled out the palettes that could potentially give us very similar looks out of this palette. Some of them are smaller palettes, some of them are larger palettes. I have Pat McGrath, of course, to compare to, and of course, Natasha Denona herself. So if you'd like to skip this portion and go straight to the looks, check out the timestamps underneath this video. First palette that I wanted to compare is the Cutie from Nabla palette. And I think there's quite a bit of a resemblance here. This is definitely much smaller, more created palette, but I think the brown shade look very, very similar. The coral shades, the shimmer shades in this palette are absolutely spectacular. I do believe that this palette was discontinued, but if you have it, you may want to pull it out. The next palette I wanted to compare to is Love Fast. And at first they're definitely very different, but there is a little bit of like pinkiness and browniness going on. This shade Equinox initially was supposed to be leaning like lilac almost. So I thought that the very top row and the darkest brown could possibly give you something close, but generally this palette is definitely leaning like very warm, very sultry, more purple. So for my personal interest, I wanted to compare these two together. This is an Unbreakable Bond from Sydney Grace. I definitely think that the Sydney Grace leans more on a cooler tone, but if you think that this palette is too warm for you, you might actually like this one because the quality of the Unbreakable Bond is impeccable. So I did want to do a Utopian Dream comparison. I don't think that there's any similarity here. Utopian Dream, maybe in some of the neutrals, maybe if the coral shade, the pinky coral shade in Pat McGrath can be sheared out, the darker brown look a little bit similar. Overall, I feel like the Utopian Dream is definitely giving you like a punch of color. Okay, let's compare it to Cor de Rosa from Sigma Beauty. These two are definitely very much related, very similar palettes. If I cover this pink shade right here, I think there's so much similarity between these two. Then I wanted to compare these two together. They are definitely not the same. This is definitely more pink and it seems like it's more on a cooler tone. This one seems warmer, and I'm only comparing like those light pink shades. Let's compare these two palettes. The Bloom palette is definitely so much warmer next to the Retro. However, I think like these two right here are definitely kind of resembling some of these tones right here. If you already have some of these mid-size palettes from Natasha Denona, take a closer look because I think some of the individual shades are considerably relatable. This is one of my favorite palettes, the Glam Face palette. Whenever I have this palette standing separately, I always feel like it's pulling a little bit pink, but now that I have this next to Bloom palette, it's definitely giving so much more neutral than this range right here. Here, let's compare I Need a Warm with a Bloom. This is the most recent palette. Definitely think that they're quite different. There's some similarity. So they are different, but they're very similar the way they're built. This is a monochromatic palette and this is a monochromatic palette. What I want to say is that Natasha Denona has been doing a lot of monochromatic palettes in the past few years, and I think she's just building that range of monochromatic palette color stories that would fit into so many different skin tones. And I think it's a great idea. Dare speak for a lot of people that we're waiting for more interesting color stories here, because I love this color story. I enjoy this palette so much. This is just my type of neutrals, and I use this palette. I reach for this palette quite a bit. The formula is super beautiful in this palette, so I am very excited to try this one because, like I said, I do like my corals and pinks. We will see how this palette performs today. And then let's compare it to I Need a Nude. This is definitely much cooler than this. I think some of the lighter shades are very similar. Like this one is very similar to this, but it's just touch bit warmer, as well as this one and this one. This one's just tiny bit warmer and more pink than this one. A very loved palette in my collection. This is Nubian Coral from Juvia's Place. Disregard all the grays and just try to look at all the neutrals and corals, and I think there's a lot of resemblance. There's this shade right here that is kind of like that mid-tone. It seems like it's very close to this shade right here. The similar browns. So this shade really resembles with this one. This coral shade also seems like it's matching with this one. I received quite a few requests from you guys to compare it to Mini Biba and Mini Zendo, which I had in my collection. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of similarity, especially to Mini Biba. Let me know what you think on this one. So I definitely want to play with this palette to see where it stands on its own or how it compares to other palettes that I already have in my collection. Let me know what other palettes you may have thought that may resemble this color story. Now let's get into the makeup look tutorial. Let's begin from look number one. I don't really know what I'm gonna do yet. I'm just kind of gonna improvise here. I will tell you right away that I wasn't impressed by the swatches. I just did the swatches. And I obviously haven't tried any of the shades yet on my eyes. It's going to be absolutely first impression right now. Maybe once I start applying everything on my eyes, then my opinion will change. My favorite shimmer formula from Natasha Denona is a sparkling foil. And this palette has 4, and I'll tell you, they did not feel like sparkling foils. The ones that I know from, say, Yucca palette, they did not feel the same, to my opinion. I will hold off on more of my thoughts until the end of this video. Let's get started. I'm going to go with this first shade, Paddle. I've been getting quite a few requests from you guys to know which brushes I'm using in my tutorial videos. So I feel like it's easier if I put them on the screen for you. Let me know if that works for you guys, because sometimes I speed through my application video and I can't always just verbally announce them what I'm using. I think it would just be easier for me to go ahead and put them on a screen for you. If I remember to talk about my brushes, I will be telling you what I'm using. This is a number 5, a blending brush from Alter Ego set. I've been talking about them. First shade, as you can see, does not show up on my skin. I'm gonna go next to this shade. It's called Keen. I'm using the What's Up Beauty R104 brush. It's a very pretty shade. It definitely shows up much nicer on my skin. Blends out okay so far. The same shade on the lower lash line. So this specific shade is indicated as CM. To my understanding, it's a cream matte, but it's very powdery. There is a good amount of kickback on it. Not that I mind the kickback. Sometimes it helps with the blending of the eyeshadow, but generally it doesn't feel like a cream matte from her previous formulas. Now I'm gonna go into this shade next. It's called Bark. This has to be a cream matte also. And I'm going to start putting it on my outer corner. This shade also has a little bit of a kickback as well. I will do the same thing on a lower lash line. I'm going to use this shade Lush, which is a sparkling foil. I'm going to finish my look with another sparkling foil, this shade right here called Crisp, and it's described as a sparkling foil duochrome, coral with gold. Okay, so that didn't really transfer on my skin much, so let me go ahead and spray that. Okay, this is a little bit better. Let me go ahead and finish up on this look and I'll come back with my final thoughts on swatches. Okay guys, this is the first finished look. Let me know what you think. This is definitely a look that I would wear on a daily basis. These are all the shades that I used. I used 3 mattes and 2 shimmers. This is cream matte. So when I swatch it, it does feel like a cream matte, like the new formula of the cream matte that she introduced in her last palette. These sparkling foils, she didn't mention that this is a new formulation, but this is not the sparkling foil shimmer formula that I know from, like I said, Yaka palette. These two feel very thin, and this duochrome is not duochroming. I think it's pretty like day wear look. If I wanted to recreate this for the evening look, I don't think this is sparkly enough for me. I'm not gonna jump with more of my thoughts at the moment. Let's do more looks and then I will share all my final thoughts with you at the end of this. On the second look, I'm gonna start with the same shade, Petal, since it's almost like a lid setting shade for me. I think I'm gonna go more of a pink route this time. I'm gonna go with this shade. It's called Wren. This is a shade that I think is somewhat more unique. I'm going to do the same shade on a lower lash line. I'm going to go with this shade next, called Floss. Floss, me being in dentistry, but it's spelled with 1 S, so I need to look that up what that is. I'm going to go to the next dark shade here. It's called Clover. It seems to be a little bit more like mauve, almost leaning purplish burgundy. I'm gonna go with the same Raphael 13 brush and use the same shade and deepen out this outer corner because it's not deep enough for me. Now that I'm blending this, it makes me feel like I should have started with a reverse blending technique where I would start with the darker matte first in the outer corner and then blend into the gradient to the lighter shade, because I feel like right now everything is kind of blending into each other. It kind of creates this inconsistency here in my outer corner, if you can see that. For my lid, I'm actually going to go into this shade. It's called Equinox, and it's described as a sparkling foil duochrome, peach with turquoise blue shift. Let's see what it's gonna look like on my eyes. Okay, 1 layer applied with a finger. It's sticking and that there's no fallout, but it looks very weak and very transparent. I want to pick it up with a brush. I'm using one of my favorite brushes. You guys ask me about this brush very often. This is a very old Morphe set. All these colorful brushes, I still have few of them in my collection here. Actually, I'm using 3 different ones today. I want to show you that I'm picking up this shade with a flat brush, and it doesn't really pick up, but also it feels kind of creamy. I hope you guys can see it on camera. There's no fallout. It just feels like very smooth, but it also doesn't pick up. It almost feels like cream. Sparkling foil formulas from her previous palettes are not cream. Let's see if it's gonna apply better on my lid. I want to say a little bit, but not by much. It's very, very thin. Once again, it has a little bit, it says it is a duochrome, but I don't know, you guys, I don't know. Hey guys, I finished the mascara and I just realized that I didn't do the inner corner. Let's go with this shade right here. It's called Fleur. It has a little bit of texture when I'm picking it up. This shade is described as metallic duochrome light pink with icy ivory shift. So these are all the shades that I used. I used 4 mattes and 2 shimmers. So this shade, once again, is not really showing up on my skin. It's more of like a lid setting shade. This, I think, is probably the prettiest shade so far in this entire palette. Well, so far, the shades that I've tried. This shade is fine. It does feel like her new formula of cream matte on the swatch, but This shade, you guys can even see it on the swatch that it's a little bit patchy. For some reason, it's just not as smooth. It's also that cream matte formula, but it's just not as smooth. You can see them side by side, how smooth this swatch is and how kind of patchy this one is. I'm sure you can tell from the screen, whichever device you're using to watch this video, that you could clearly see that my outer corner is patchy AF. It is what it is. Now, these two shimmers, let's talk about them. I'm looking at the viewfinder and it's given nothing. When this palette was announced, there was a lot of attention specifically onto this shade. It is a sparkling foil duochrome peach with turquoise blue shade. I don't see it. So this next shade is a metallic duochrome light pink with icy ivory shift. I don't see a duochrome. This shade does look a little bit, dare I say, dusty. Even after I sprayed it on my eye, kind of still look very, like it sits on top of my skin. So it just doesn't look flattering. I removed this makeup look. So let's start from the clean slate and pretend that never happened. It's makeup. Sometimes you don't like something, you take it off, you move on to the next. We're gonna start with this shade Petal. Okay, I'm gonna go with my Rapher 15 blending brush, and I'm gonna go into this shade Robin. This is definitely the shade that speaks to my soul. Do the same thing on the lower lash line. I'm gonna actually go into this shade once again, called Bark. I'm gonna go into my other favorite brush, again from the Morphe set that was discontinued. As you can see, my looks are kind of the same. I'm just testing the shades, and these are basically the looks that I wear kind of on a daily basis. I do like myself like a day smoky eye, but this is also kind of the concept of the look that I would do for the evening time. I may go a little bit more bold. So I want to test them in the way that I would wear them, really, because when you look at this palette, it just kind of seems, dare I say, wearable, right? So far, this matte shade built up really nicely and blended really nicely. Do the same thing in the lower lash line. I kind of want to dip into this shade and this shade because we haven't tried them yet. Amber is this shade. It's very smooth. It doesn't really have a lot of sparkle. It's just, I don't know, it just feels like it's like a nice satin. It feels very thin as well. Go into this shade next called Fluorescence. I'm gonna apply this here. This shade feels considerably dry. I'm gonna use the shade again in the inner corner. So these are all the shades that I used, 3 mattes and 3 shimmers. These 2 mattes blended out really beautifully and they're really nice quality. It was easy to build up these shades as well. This is smooth, but not as smooth as I would like it to be. It's not as smooth as I would expect from Natasha Denona. It's not as smooth as if I were to compare it to, let's say, Sydney Grace smooth shimmers. Here, this is a double swatch here, and I still see a little bit of transparency. I feel like it's like skipping. This fluorescence shade is considerably shy, in my opinion. These two looks are very similar, even though it is a separate look, but is it really that different? You will be the judge for that. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. All right, guys, let me give you my first impression, final thoughts on the new Bloom palette from Natasha Denona. The packaging is pretty. It's definitely prettier in person than on the photos. That's my humble opinion. This type of color story definitely appeals to me personally because I do like to wear like peaches and rosy tones and pinks with nice, beautiful browns, whether they are like neutrals or warmer. Shimmer shades generally go from like lighter to darker ones, so you can technically, by looking at it, create like a darker smoky eye. However, here are my final thoughts. You were here with me for the all 3 look tutorials, and you guys saw that this was quite a ride. I honestly do not even know where to start sharing my thoughts because I think this never happened in the history of my channel with Natasha Denona palettes. It happened with other brands, but it never happened with Natasha Denona brand palettes. If you've been on my channel for a little bit, you know the size of my Natasha Denona collection of both mid-size palettes and little palettes and 5-pan palettes. You know how much I love her formula. I'm not really sure what happened today, but something happened. I feel like the mattes are okay for most part. They are fine. They're workable. As far as the shimmers, I like the balance of mattes and shimmers here. You do get a good variety technically of shimmers, a gradient of shimmers as well, so that's always nice to see in the palettes. However, as far as the shimmer quality, I'm disappointed, you guys. These shimmers are not Natasha Denona formula that I know. Even though they do have the same description of the formulations, I do not see duochromes, not one single one of them. This special shade that was so marketed, it's not duochroming. It's barely even shimmering. I sprayed some of these lighter shimmers and they still look kind of dusty. And this is definitely not what I expected. The makeup looks that I created, well, let's just talk about the two, because we're not talking about the second one. They are within my comfort zone, but I don't necessarily find them special. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap up my video here. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you have additional questions or comments, I would love to chat with you there. If you enjoyed this video, give this a big thumb up. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not yet a subscriber. Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.